The sun had barely climbed above the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the training range. A low hum of anticipation lingered in the air, mixed with the metallic scent of gunpowder and the faint tang of sweat. She stood at the edge of the range, rifle slung across her back, her hands folded calmly in front of her. To the casual observer, or more accurately, to most of the seasoned SEALs around her, she was just another bystander, quietly watching the chaos of practice and training unfold. Nobody paid her much attention. That was fine. She preferred it that way. The range was alive with motion. Soldiers shouted distances, instructors barked corrections, and shells ricocheted off steel targets with satisfying clangs. Veterans moved like clockwork, a mixture of muscle memory and brute skill guiding every action. Some grinned confidently, some cursed under their breath when a shot went wide, but all of them had one thing in common: a sense of pride in the long-standing SEAL record they had all grown up hearing about. A record that had survived 10 years without being broken. They didn't even consider that someone like her might challenge it. Her eyes, however, were far from idle. Every movement, every misstep, every slight adjustment made by those around her was meticulously observed, catalogued, and analyzed. She wasn't just watching. She was studying, memorizing, internalizing patterns that might give her the edge when it mattered most. Her calm demeanor concealed a storm of focus. She was fully aware of how people perceived her: quiet, reserved, perhaps even shy. It was an image that worked in her favor. Most of the men around her didn't suspect she possessed the precision and skill required to even approach the record. They assumed she was an observer, maybe a curious onlooker, perhaps someone tagging along for the experience. Inside, however, she was calculating. Every target had a trajectory in her mind, every distance measured with unerring accuracy. Her fingers twitched slightly, not from nerves but from the anticipation that had been building for weeks. The record had stood for a decade, and it had become a legend, whispered about in barracks, celebrated among instructors, a badge of honor only the most elite could touch. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, training in silence while others played and boasted. Her preparation was meticulous. She had studied wind patterns, temperature variations, the tiniest mechanical nuances of her rifle, and the subtle idiosyncrasies of the range itself. The SEALs around her continued with their drills, unaware of the storm quietly gathering beside them. A few glanced her way occasionally, wondering if she even intended to participate. One veteran chuckled softly, nudging another. "She's just watching," he said. "Probably doesn't even know how to hold the rifle right." His companion laughed, shaking his head. Yet neither of them noticed the barely perceptible tightening of her jaw, the sharpness in her gaze. She was listening, learning, and waiting. Then quietly, almost innocuously, she spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and surprisingly confident. "Can I take the shot?" The question cut through the cacophony like a knife. Conversations paused mid-word. Guns were lifted, hands froze. For a moment the range seemed to hold its breath. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, half laughter, half disbelief. A woman, they thought, quiet, unassuming, asking if she could attempt the impossible. The legendary record that had stood for 10 years, never touched, never challenged. Could she really do it? Some exchanged skeptical glances, others smirked, assuming she wouldn't even come close. She didn't flinch under the scrutiny. She didn't need validation or approval. Years of preparation had built a confidence that few could understand. Her body was steady, her mind focused, and her resolve unshakable. The room, once bustling with noise and confidence, now centered on her. The quiet observer was no longer in the shadows. She had made her move, and everyone, skeptics, veterans, instructors, was suddenly forced to pay attention. The silence after her question hung in the air, heavy and electric. For a moment the seasoned SEALs and instructors simply stared, their expressions a mix of amusement, disbelief, and curiosity. None had expected this. A quiet woman, long overlooked, suddenly stepping forward to challenge a record that had stood unbroken for a decade. The record wasn't just a number, it was a legend. Tales of the men who had set it and the countless others who had tried and failed were whispered in the halls like myths. It was a test of precision, patience, and nerves of steel. "Are you sure you know what you're asking?" one of the instructors finally said, his tone half serious, half incredulous. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, grizzled from years in the field, and few dared challenge his authority. He glanced at the record board behind him, the name etched in bold letters, untouchable, iconic. She didn't flinch. Her calm, unwavering gaze met his. "I've trained for this," she said simply. The confidence in her voice made some pause, questioning their assumptions. Around her, the veterans muttered under their breath. A few laughed quietly, shaking their heads. "She's brave or crazy," one said, smirking. Another scoffed, 10 years. "No one's done it, why would she even try?" The room, filled with decades of experience and pride, was suddenly shifting. A new variable had entered, the quiet observer who had been underestimated, ignored, and assumed irrelevant. Now all eyes were on her. The instructors deliberated. The record was not a casual challenge. It was grueling, requiring absolute focus, technical mastery, and the ability to withstand immense pressure. They had rules, protocols, and a reputation to uphold. But there was something in her stance, in the calm determination etched on her face, that made them pause. She wasn't cocky. She wasn't trying to prove a point to the crowd. She simply wanted to see if she could achieve it. That purity of purpose was rare. Finally, the head instructor nodded. "All right," he said, his voice carrying authority. "You can take the shot, but understand this, it hasn't been broken in 10 years. Hundreds have tried and failed. Don't let pressure get to you. Focus." There was no hesitation in her response. She nodded once, quietly acknowledging the gravity of what she was about to attempt. Every muscle in her body was poised, every thought aligned with the target. As she stepped forward, the range seemed to grow quieter. The veterans lined up, some incredulous, some curious, but all watching with bated breath. Whispers spread. "She's serious. She's actually going to try." Even the most skeptical couldn't hide a flicker of intrigue. There was a tension in the air, a rare energy that accompanies the moment when history might be rewritten. It wasn't just about breaking a record anymore. It was about challenging expectations, defying assumptions, and proving that skill and preparation could outweigh reputation and gender. She approached the rifle carefully, checking her stance, her grip, and the alignment of the sights. Every eye on the range was locked on her movements. Some veterans muttered quietly to themselves, recalling failed attempts from years past. They remembered the sweat, the frustration, the countless times the bullet had fallen short or veered just enough to ruin a record-breaking attempt. They wondered, could she, someone who had been quietly observing all this time, really succeed where so many others had failed? Her heart beat steadily, though inside adrenaline surged. This was the culmination of years of preparation, of countless hours spent refining every detail. The SEAL record wasn't just a challenge of skill, it was a test of nerve, of focus, of the ability to control every variable in a chaotic environment. She inhaled deeply, centering herself, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath. One shot, one chance. And suddenly, the quiet observer was no longer just watching. She was at the edge of making history. The early morning sun now glinted sharply off the metal of the rifles, reflecting the quiet intensity in her eyes. She knelt, adjusting her stance, feeling the subtle shifts in balance as her boots dug into the range's gravel. Every movement was deliberate, every motion rehearsed. While the veterans had approached this challenge with confidence born of experience, she approached it like a calculation, a complex equation where even the tiniest error could mean failure. This was no longer a casual request to take the shot. This was her moment, and she would meet it on her own terms. Her preparation was exhaustive. She had memorized every detail of the range, the distance to each target, the wind's unpredictable gusts, the way sunlight changed the perception of shadows throughout the day. She adjusted the rifle meticulously, checking the sight alignment, the trigger sensitivity, and even the minute calibration of the scope. Her fingers moved with precision, honed through years of repetitive drills that most observers would have considered monotonous. Yet for her, every repetition, every adjustment, was a step closer to perfection. The instructors watched silently from a distance. At first, their expressions were skeptical. This was, after all, a woman entering a sphere long dominated by men who had trained for years under the toughest conditions imaginable. But as she worked, their skepticism shifted toward quiet astonishment. She moved with purpose, confidence, and a poise that demanded recognition, even from the most hardened veterans. Her dedication was evident in the subtle tension of her muscles, in the unwavering calm of her eyes, and in the meticulous care she gave to every detail of the rifle. She had spent hours not just perfecting her aim, but conditioning her mind. Mental rehearsal had become a ritual, visualizing the exact trajectory, imagining every variable: wind, temperature, distance, and even the faint tremor in her own heartbeat. She had practiced breathing in sync with her thoughts, a technique borrowed from elite sharpshooters and meditation exercises alike. Each inhalation and exhalation became a metronome, keeping her centered, keeping the chaos of the world outside at bay. Around her, the range buzzed with activity, but she remained in a bubble of focus. Veterans practiced, instructors barked corrections, and the distant echo of gunfire punctuated the air. Some looked over, whispering among themselves. "She's calm, too calm," one murmured. Another chuckled softly. "Maybe she's lucky, or maybe she knows something we don't." There was a grudging respect beginning to form, a recognition that the quiet observer was no longer merely a spectator. Despite her focus, she remained keenly aware of the eyes on her. Every glance from the seasoned SEALs, every quiet murmur from the instructors, was absorbed and catalogued. It was not intimidation, it was data. She had learned to transform scrutiny into fuel, doubt into determination. Years of being underestimated had prepared her for this moment more than anyone else on the range. Finally, after what felt like hours compressed into minutes, she lowered the rifle and exhaled slowly. Sweat dotted her brow, but her hands remained steady. Every adjustment, every calculation, every rehearsal had prepared her for the pivotal moment. The record was within reach, not because of luck, not because of bravado, but because of deliberate, patient preparation. The veterans who had once smirked or dismissed her now exchanged silent glances. The quiet observer had transformed into a force to be reckoned with. What remained was only the shot, the culmination of focus, preparation, and courage. She positioned herself, took a measured breath, and aligned the sights, her mind narrowing until the world outside vanished. One shot, one opportunity, and the room, filled with anticipation and skepticism, waited to see if she could turn preparation into history. The moment had arrived. She positioned herself at the firing line, rifle in hand, her posture flawless, every muscle controlled and ready. Around her, the SEALs and instructors fell into a hushed anticipation. Even the seasoned veterans, whose confidence usually bordered on arrogance, found themselves leaning forward, eyes wide with curiosity. The quiet observer was no longer a background figure. She was the center of attention, the unexpected contender for a record that had stood unchallenged for a decade. She exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of her breath settle her nerves. This was the culmination of years of preparation, the countless hours of practice, the meticulous mental rehearsal, the patience to study every detail of her weapon, the environmental conditions, and even her own heartbeat. Her eyes narrowed slightly as they locked onto the distant target, the bullseye, a tiny dot of impossibility in the mid-morning sun. The veterans shifted, some exchanging incredulous glances. "She's serious," one muttered under his breath. "No one's attempted it this way before." Another shook his head, trying to hide a flicker of doubt that had crept in despite his years of experience. The instructors, seasoned and pragmatic, simply watched silently, knowing that the smallest mistake here could cost the attempt. But even they had begun to notice something extraordinary. A calm, unshakable focus, a presence of mind rarely seen in shooters at any level. She steadied her breathing and gently rested the rifle against her shoulder, feeling its weight, its balance, its perfect alignment. Each finger, each movement was intentional, honed over years of repetition. Her heart beat steadily, yet beneath the calm surface, adrenaline surged, sharpening her senses, heightening her awareness of the wind, the slight movement of distant foliage, the subtle change in light. Every detail mattered, and she absorbed it all without hesitation. Then, with the quiet confidence of someone who had anticipated this moment 1,000 times in her mind, she squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and precise, echoing across the range. Heads turned instantly. For a brief, breathless moment, no one moved. Even the instructors held their silence, as if time had stopped to witness the outcome. The bullet struck the target with precision that drew audible gasps from some of the veterans. It was an impressive shot, far beyond what many expected from a first attempt. Yet when the score was tallied, it fell just short of the record. Not enough to rewrite history, but enough to make everyone pause. Whispers began to ripple across the line, astonishment, curiosity, and the faint beginnings of respect. She didn't flinch, didn't show disappointment. Instead, she lowered the rifle, adjusted her stance, and took a deliberate breath. Every failure, she knew, was merely another piece of data. She analyzed the minor deviation, recalculated, and prepared herself mentally for the next attempt. While the veterans murmured and speculated about luck or coincidence, she remained entirely in control, turning every moment into a stepping stone toward mastery. Some of the instructors exchanged subtle nods. Even the skeptics could not ignore the meticulous process she followed. Each movement was deliberate, each adjustment thoughtful. They had seen many attempts, many failures, and yet here was a woman, underestimated and overlooked, approaching the challenge with the precision and patience that the record demanded. As she herself for the next shot, the room held its collective breath. This was more than an attempt, it was a statement, a quiet but undeniable proof that preparation, focus, and determination could defy expectation. The quiet observer, long underestimated, was no longer just watching. She was on the verge of history, and everyone in the room felt the electricity of possibility crackling in the air. The room was thick with anticipation, the air vibrating with tension. Veterans, once dismissive, now watched in silence, each aware that something remarkable was unfolding. She stood slightly apart, rifle in hand, her eyes locked on the target. Despite the calm exterior, she felt the familiar tug of doubt creeping in, a shadow she had learned to face long before this day. Memories of past failures, moments when she had been underestimated or dismissed, flashed in her mind. Yet instead of weakening her, they fueled her determination. She had come too far to falter now. Every fiber of her body was alive with awareness. She could feel the subtle pull of the wind, the way the morning light shifted across the distant target, the faint tremor in her grip. Years of training had taught her that perfection demanded not only skill but the mastery of these tiny, nearly invisible variables. Even the smallest distraction could ruin the shot. She inhaled slowly, centering herself, visualizing the bullet's path as it arced toward the bull's. Every misstep she had ever made had been a lesson. Every late night and missed opportunity had prepared her for this moment. The veterans around her whispered in quiet awe. "She's focused, like she's in another world," one said. Another muttered, "I've never seen anyone like her." The instructors, seasoned and pragmatic, remained stoically observant, but even they could not hide the glimmer of admiration. They had seen countless attempts, watched the best shooters falter under pressure, and yet here was someone who seemed untouchable, not because of arrogance, but because of relentless preparation and a mind as disciplined as a well-oiled machine. Yet doubt lingered. Could she truly break the 10-year record? Could one shot, one moment truly surpass what so many had failed to achieve? She acknowledged the fear, the uncertainty, but did not let it consume her. Instead, she transformed it into focus, sharpening her senses, tuning into the rhythm of her breathing, the hum of the range, and the minute details that would guide her bullet to its mark. Doubt became fuel, anxiety became a tool, pressure became the lens through which she honed her skill. She lowered the rifle briefly, running her fingers along the barrel, checking alignment, adjusting for a fraction of a millimeter. Her movements were calm but deliberate, almost ritualistic, a dance she had rehearsed countless times in solitude. She reminded herself that the record was not an enemy, but a target to meet with precision, patience, and unwavering belief in her ability. Confidence was silent, not loud, not boastful. It was steady, grounded in preparation and experience. Around her, the room had quieted. The veterans had stopped whispering, the instructors had paused their corrections. All eyes were on her, anticipating the next shot, the one that might redefine history. The magnitude of the moment was not lost on anyone present. Even the most skeptical began to sense that this was no ordinary attempt. This was a display of discipline, courage, and resilience, the culmination of years of preparation distilled into a single decisive act. Her heartbeat, steady yet energized, guided her movements as she adjusted her stance, took a measured breath, and raised the rifle once more. The world outside seemed to vanish. All that mattered was the target, the trajectory, the bullet, and the culmination of skill and perseverance. In that suspended moment, she felt both the weight of history and the clarity of purpose. Doubts had been acknowledged, tested, and transformed. Now only action remained. She exhaled slowly, lining up the sights with meticulous care. Every calculation, every rehearsal, every lesson of the past converged in this single, crucial instant. The quiet observer, once underestimated and overlooked, was ready to step into legend. The room waited, breathless, for what could be the defining moment of her journey, a moment that could finally break a 10-year SEAL record and forever change how she was seen. The world seemed to pause. Every whisper, every shuffle, every heartbeat in the room fell away, leaving only the quiet hum of anticipation. She stood at the line, rifle raised, eyes locked on the distant target. Years of preparation, countless hours of mental rehearsal, and every ounce of her discipline converged in this single moment. The 10-year SEAL record, long regarded as untouchable, was within her reach. She inhaled deeply, letting the rhythm of her breath align with the pulse of the range, and exhaled slowly, steadying her mind and body for the shot that could change everything. Around her, the veterans and instructors held their collective breath. Some leaned forward, unable to tear their eyes away. Others gripped the edges of benches or rifles in silent tension. The whispers of doubt that had once floated through the room had vanished, replaced by a sense of awe, even fear. No one had expected this quiet observer, long underestimated, to reach the precipice of history. Yet here she was, calm, focused, resolute. She lined up the sights, the bullseye a tiny, distant point of absolute precision. The wind was steady, the light consistent, and every factor she had meticulously studied was now aligned. Her fingers rested lightly on the trigger, an extension of her practiced rhythm. The room seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to the space between her, the rifle, and the target. Years of doubt, training, and anticipation culminated in this singular, crystalline moment of focus. And then, with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent countless hours visualizing the perfect shot, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle discharged with a sharp, echoing report that ricocheted across the range. Time seemed to stretch, each millisecond pregnant with suspense. Heads turned, eyes widened, and the room collectively leaned into the moment. The bullet flew through the air, a streak of precision guided by her focus, determination, and years of preparation. The target was struck, a perfect hit. The scoreboard illuminated, revealing the number that had long been the subject of legends and whispered challenges. She had done it. She had broken the 10-year SEAL record. For a moment, silence reigned, a stunned, breathless awe that filled the space. Then came the eruption, cheers, applause, whistles, and shouts of astonishment. The veterans, the instructors, everyone present erupted in disbelief and admiration. Even the most skeptical could not deny what had just occurred. She lowered her rifle slowly, a small, controlled smile on her face. There was no need for theatrics. The magnitude of the moment spoke for itself. The record was hers, but more than that, she had transformed perception. Those who had dismissed her, who had underestimated her skill and resolve, now regarded her with genuine respect and awe. She had done more than break a record. She had rewritten expectations. Instructors approached cautiously, almost reverently, to shake her hand. "I didn't think anyone could do it," one admitted, voice tinged with disbelief. She smiled, replying simply, "Preparation makes the difference." Around the range, conversations buzzed, flashes of phones captured the moment, and the energy was electric. A quiet observer had become a legend in a single shot, her discipline and skill undeniable to all who witnessed it. As she stepped back, letting others crowd around to congratulate her, she allowed herself a brief reflection. The record, the accolades, the awe, they were significant, yes, but the true triumph lay in proving what focus, patience, and relentless preparation could achieve. The room, once filled with doubt and skepticism, now celebrated her mastery. In that moment, she was no longer just a participant. She was a symbol of excellence, resilience, and courage. The 10-year seal record had fallen, and with it, the notion that only tradition and reputation could define possibility. She had broken barriers, silenced skeptics, and in doing so, inspired everyone present to reconsider what could be achieved through unwavering dedication. History had been made. The news of her achievement spread like wildfire. Within hours, whispers in the SEAL community turned into conversations, and conversations into headlines. Instructors, peers, and even those who had doubted her began to acknowledge the impossible had been done. The quiet observer, once underestimated, had not only broken a 10-year record but had done so with a combination of precision, discipline, and unshakable focus that left everyone in awe. She became a topic of discussion, a symbol of perseverance, and a reminder that skill could triumph over expectation. She received messages and calls from veterans, young recruits, and fellow marksmen, all expressing admiration and curiosity. Some asked for guidance, hoping to learn the techniques, mental preparation, and mindset that had allowed her to succeed. Others shared their own struggles, inspired by her story to believe in the possibility of breaking barriers they had once assumed were insurmountable. Even the instructors who had initially questioned her abilities offered congratulations with a newfound respect. Their words carried weight. This was more than a record. It was validation of years of preparation and unwavering determination. She, however, remained grounded. Recognition was gratifying, certainly, but it was secondary to the achievement itself. Her mind wandered back to the countless hours she had spent alone in training, visualizing each shot, practicing in silence, and refining every motion to perfection. Every moment of doubt, every instance of being underestimated, had been a test of her resolve. She realized that the accomplishment was not simply about the number on the scoreboard. It was about the discipline, patience, and courage it had taken to reach that point. Reflection brought a quiet satisfaction. She thought of the skeptics, those who had assumed she was merely watching, and she understood their disbelief. It wasn't personal. It was a consequence of underestimating someone who chose preparation over performance until the decisive moment. Her success had proven that skill and determination could overcome assumptions, that quiet dedication often outlasts arrogance and bravado. For her, the achievement symbolized a larger truth. Consistency, focus, and resilience mattered more than flashiness or reputation. The media, too, began to take notice. Interviews, profiles, and news stories highlighted not only the record-breaking achievement but the story behind it, the quiet observer who had transformed skepticism into admiration. She spoke carefully, emphasizing preparation, discipline, and the mental focus required to succeed at such a high level. Fame was incidental. Her goal was to inspire, to show that barriers, whether imposed by tradition, expectation, or prejudice, could be overcome through dedication. Each interview, each article, became an opportunity to convey a message larger than the record itself. Persistence and belief in oneself are powerful tools. In the military community, her accomplishments sparked conversations about inclusivity, talent, and the importance of recognizing potential beyond appearances. Young women, in particular, found in her story a source of inspiration. Her achievement became a beacon, showing that even in male-dominated arenas, focus, preparation, and courage could lead to success. She mentored some, offering advice and encouragement, guiding the next generation toward excellence while subtly reshaping perceptions about capability and determination. Yet for all the accolades and attention, she remained quietly introspective. The record was now hers, the achievement undeniable, but she understood that true fulfillment came from the journey itself, the countless hours of preparation, the discipline she had maintained, and the ability to confront and overcome doubt. Recognition was fleeting. The skill, the focus, and the resilience that made her succeed were enduring. She had proven herself to others, but more importantly, she had proven herself to herself. As the excitement and attention swirled around her, she took a moment to breathe, to absorb the significance of what had happened. She realized that breaking the record was only the beginning. The impact of her achievement would ripple outward, inspiring others to challenge expectations, break barriers, and pursue excellence with unwavering focus. The quiet observer had become a living testament to the power of preparation, courage, and relentless determination, and her story would resonate far beyond the walls of the training range. The story of her record-breaking shot spread far beyond the walls of the SEAL training range. It became more than a tale of precision and skill. It evolved into a narrative of courage, discipline, and the refusal to be underestimated. Across the military community, her name was whispered with respect and admiration. She was no longer the quiet observer. She had become a symbol of possibility, an emblem of what could be achieved when determination and preparation intersected with opportunity. Her influence stretched far beyond the scoreboard, touching aspiring marksmen, young women, and anyone who had ever been told they couldn't succeed. She began receiving letters and messages from all over the country. Young recruits, both men and women, wrote to her asking for guidance, inspiration, and advice. Some shared stories of self-doubt, of obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and of dreams that had been quietly shelved due to lack of support or belief. She responded to as many as she could, offering insights into focus, perseverance, and the mental discipline required to achieve extraordinary feats. Her message was consistent. Success is not reserved for the most experienced, the loudest, or the most celebrated. It is earned through preparation, patience, and unwavering belief in oneself. The SEAL community, traditionally steeped in hierarchy and long-standing expectations, began to shift subtly in its perception of talent. Instructors spoke of her as a case study in resilience and skill, a reminder that potential could be found in unexpected places. Her achievement challenged conventional thinking and inspired a reevaluation of how individuals were trained, assessed, and recognized. More importantly, it demonstrated that barriers, whether due to tradition, gender, or reputation, could be overcome with the right combination of focus and determination. Beyond the military, her story resonated with the public. Media coverage highlighted not only the record but the journey behind it, the countless hours of solitary practice, the quiet preparation, and the steady resolve that had enabled her to succeed where others had failed. She became an advocate for perseverance and self-belief, sharing her experiences in talks, interviews, and mentorship programs. Her narrative encouraged others to challenge expectations and to recognize that greatness is rarely instantaneous. It is forged through persistence, discipline, and courage. Her influence was particularly profound among young women aspiring to enter male-dominated fields. She became a role model, demonstrating that gender was not a limitation but merely a factor that could be transcended with dedication. She mentored several emerging marksmen, guiding them not only in technique but in mindset, emphasizing the importance of focus, patience, and self-confidence. The record she had broken became a symbol, not merely of her personal achievement, but of what anyone with determination and skill could accomplish. Even years later, the memory of her first record-breaking shot continued to inspire. Veterans recalled the disbelief that had turned into admiration. Instructors spoke of her as a benchmark of discipline and mastery. She, however, remained grounded. For her, the legacy was not in the accolades or the media attention, but in the people she inspired, the barriers she helped break, and the example she had set for others striving to achieve the seemingly impossible. In quiet moments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The long hours of preparation, the obstacles faced, the doubts confronted, and the resilience required, all of it had culminated in a single defining moment. That moment had not only rewritten a 10-year record but had also redefined what was possible for those who dared to believe in themselves. Her story, once a quiet observation, had become a clarion call to anyone willing to prepare, focus, and persist. Ultimately, her legacy was simple yet profound. Excellence is achieved not by waiting to be recognized but by quietly cultivating skill, resilience, and courage. The quiet observer had transformed into a trailblazer, leaving behind a path illuminated for those who would follow. Through her actions, she had shown that history is not written by assumptions or expectations. It is written by those who are willing to take the shot, even when everyone else doubts they can.